and we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask Terrie some questions as well. So firstly, thank you everybody for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have you all here. I am Kelly Krause. For those of you who may not know me, I am joined by my fabulous co-host, Mo Moshadi. Mo and I are two founding members of Nick's Horror Collective. And just in case you're not in the know, Nick's Horror is a women-led community of women horror creators who are working to develop, elevate, and celebrate original women-led horror content in film, TV, and new media. We are so pleased to be joined by one of our creators today who's doing amazing, amazing things, writer-director Terrie Samundra. So Terrie, welcome.
Thank you. Super excited to be here.
I just want to do a quick intro for Terrie, so brace yourselves because it's very impressive. So Terrie, again, is a writer-director who grew up between a rural village in India, a small farming town in Missouri, and the California coast, informing her work as a multicultural artist. KAALI KHUHI, a Netflix original film, which we will be talking about heavily today, is her debut feature and follows a 10-year-old girl named Shivangi on her journey to save her family's village from the restless ghosts of its horrific past. Terrie is also the writer-director of the short films Kunjo, Ice Cream Walla, and A Short Tale of Shwin, which have all played internationally and garnered accolades from the Athens International Film Festival, the Indian Film Festival of LA, and the Angeles Film Festival, to name but a few. Additionally, she created 10 short documentaries, count them 10, for Planned Parenthood's Stories of Care series to coincide with the organization's 100-year anniversary in 2016. Terrie has taught screenwriting at San Francisco State University and has worked as a creative writing instructor at Create Now, an arts organization focused on mentorship and education for at-risk homeless and foster youth. She is an alumna of the Sundance Institute's International Screenwriters Lab and has been a recipient of the Princess Grace Award, the National Geographic All Roads Seed Grant, and alongside her creative partner, David Walter Lech, the SF Film Kenneth Rainin Foundation Screenwriting Fellowship. Wow. Well done, Terrie. That is fabulous. And again, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like I need to edit my bio. Yeah.
No, right. Perfect.
That's a lot.
It's perfect. So just before we dive into Q&A, a couple quick housekeeping rules. We ask that you keep yourselves muted throughout the moderated Q&A. Any questions that you have for Terrie, please dump them into the chat box. Mo and I will be moderating that. And once we begin the audience portion of the Q&A, you will have the opportunity to unmute yourself and put your questions directly to Terrie. So with that said and out of the way, Mo, take it away.
Well, hello. So I just wanted to, again, thank you so much for being here. It's been really awesome to not only see your film and be with you as I guess a co-worker of Nick's Horror Collective. I just think it's just been really cool to have that I guess to have that camaraderie already. And really with starting off with your film, which I absolutely love. I love anything that has to do, I love a good ghost story. So for me, it was just wonderful to witness, and the setting is just so rich with history and its own lore. So I think with the film, it was shot in the very village you were raised in Punjab, India, correct?
Actually, it wasn't shot in the exact village. My village was approximately like 2 hours away. But it was shot in, I mean, things have changed so much since I was a kid, but we wanted it to look timeless and classic, and we wanted it to look like how it did when I was a child. It has this very kind of nostalgic feeling, and also it's, you know, it's classic and timeless, so there's no cell phones, there's no billboards or televisions or anything like that. So we found this incredible village, which is literally on the border of Pakistan and Punjab. So where we were shooting, you can see Pakistan. I mean, it's, you know, got this history that is obviously heartbreaking with the partition, and, you know, I'm interested in that. And so the village that we shot in is about 2 hours from my village, and it's just this beautiful old Punjabi village. And so we just lucked out. We had great location scouts. So close enough, yes.
In the general vicinity, which is, and it's beautiful, beautifully shot. And I love the fact that it's very time centric as to where it's located. And can you tell me a little bit about your Punjabi background and why you wanted to tell that story in particular?
Sure. So I'm like many kids of the diaspora now, or, people all over the world, where you're literally growing up in multiple cultures in different places. So I grew up in India and here. I mixed, and but I did spend my early childhood in the village. That's my grandfather's village, and I think that it's just always been a part of my dream landscape and storytelling that I'm interested in. And I've, gone there so many times, and I have made other films there, other shorts there. My mother's also a Punjabi writer and a poet. And so I think it's just, I'm working in the lineage that she's working in. There's actually, a rich history of storytelling and folklore and poetry and writing from Punjab, which is in Urdu and Gurmukhi, or, Gurmukhi Punjabi. And, but there's not a lot of people doing cinema. So I think, it's the lineage of my mother and other women, but now I'm taking it into cinematic language. And I just find myself, it's such a cinematic place, and there's so many stories from there. And my aunts raised me, my mother, my grandmother, I'm so interconnected with the intergenerational women and the stories that I was told as a child and what I witnessed. So it just seemed natural for me to make my first feature there. It's, what I wanted to do. Plus, I, have written many other screenplays, but with KAALI KHUHI, it was one location, one family, very contained, which is, a smart way to approach your first feature. I had written this script, which I love very much, Betamax, and it's the one that I had done the Sundance Lab in India with. But that's a period piece. It takes place in 1976 in London during the South Hall riots. When I wrote it, I'm not thinking about budget. That film's going to cost like 20 million or more to make. But then again, I didn't think about budget when I was making KAALI KHUHI either. But, and I'm so grateful that Netflix greenlit it, and they greenlit it from the screenplay stage. But when we wrote it, it wasn't with the intention to make it with a studio. It was really with the intention, we're going to go and make this by hook or crook, guerrilla style, which is the manner in which I'm used to working. Mm-hmm. So, the last film I had made in India, we had a very small crew. I made it in my village. My aunt was in the film. My clan was in the film. That's my family's home. So we were just going to rough and tumble make it. So that's originally why I wrote it to be so small and a smaller story and contained.
And I love the fact that it's from a writer and that lineage down. How does your mother feel about you being this permutation that's into cinema now? How does that fruition take place?
Well, it's funny, I think many parents, I've heard other writers talk about this, they'll get an award or something and their parents well, that's good. I hope it leads to something. It's
we just want you to finish school.
Yeah. I think, my mom's really proud of me, but it's certainly taken her some time to understand what I do. And even the terminology, is it producer, is it director, is it writer, what does it mean? And she doesn't, she's still learning what screenwriting, she's a novelist and a poet. She doesn't, she's not a screenwriter, and it is a very different form of writing and storytelling. But she watched the film with my sister. My sister went up to see her. My mom doesn't have Netflix. And so my sister was like, I'm going to go up and see mom and get her set up. And they watched it. And my mom's my biggest critic and she loved the film. So that made me really happy.
I was like, biggest critic.
I mean, she's the, you know, and I'm sure there's many other cultures, but South Asian moms are known to be very intense. And
yeah.
but I mean, we, you know, we have a lot of great conversations about, you know, being women in particular, as far as like, you know, I mean, you know, unfortunately, like there's just so much patriarchy that we're all grappling with all the time. And being a Punjabi writer, poet, or filmmaker, you're still kind of finding yourselves constantly up against these kind of roadblocks, and then the, you know, the goalpost always constantly shifts, and you're always kind of in this like hazing a little bit. And but I mean, in other ways, it's liberating because you're working in your own space and you're not always like up against all those things. But what my mother has experienced, you know, in it's like I've also started to experience that, and so she in many ways can shed light on that. And you know, this film is really personal. It's an amalgamation of many things, but some people I know, some people who've, you know, morphed like 3 or 4 people, and it's, you know, kind of a combination of different ghost stories I grew up with as a child, and then of course, you know, exploring kind of this liberation of a painful past. And, you know, I mean, certainly we're not unique in this way, but our family has a history of gender violence and we've all experienced it, and there's a lineage. And so, you know, I'm working with those stories, and it's, you know, my mom's poetry and writing has definitely been a place of liberation for her, and exploring that and healing, and in many ways making this film is the same for me.
So Terrie, you I think you've hit what is for us at Nix anyway, like a very sensitive topic, and that is kind of like you know, this role of women in cinema and the challenges of that. You know, you mentioned the goalpost being like shifting consistently and having to keep up with that. I'm wondering if you can give us some broader insight into Indian horror cinema and the broader genre space, that like what has traditionally been produced, and like how are you, and how is KAALI, oh my God, how is KAALI KHUHI specifically like kind of starting to push those conventions and maybe even establish new ones, especially where the roles of women are concerned? I mean, whether they are part of the story or the ones making the story.
Well, you know, there's genre cinema that I'm not familiar with. I mean, there was a kind of a resurgence in the 80s and 90s of genre, but you know, again in India, and I think it's like this a lot of places, but I think in India in particular, it's always seen as a sub medium of cinema. It's like not considered intellectual or interesting or sophisticated, and it was always kind of, and still considered seedy or subpar, which is, you know, unfortunate. And of course, you know, just even makes me want to make it more, because I'm so interested in you know, these, just like there's so much rich history and story, especially in North West India, where there's not a, there is cinema, but it's very particular Punjabi cinema, and it's not even that respected in other regions. You know, in India, there's all this regional cinema. Like Malayalam cinema is amazing. There are some really cool genre films that I've watched that are Malayalam, and then of course Bengali cinema is just so incredible. You know, some of my favorite filmmakers are Bengali, and some of the greatest cinematic masters of the world, you know, that the Italians and French revered, you know, from, you know, 50s, 60s on. So, but Punjabi cinema and Hindi cinema in particular, there is really not a lot of genre that I have found. Certainly there are people working in it, but you have to seek it out and search for it. Most of those films haven't gotten distribution. Like every now and then, years ago when I worked at Slam Dance, I was able to find some things. Like, you know, if something gets submitted or you're like searching for it. When I was a programmer, it was I was always looking for those filmmakers, and they're hard to find. And then there is this interesting space, which is horror and comedy in India. And I'm not sure exactly where that comes from, like what it is in the culture that, and I think maybe it's more like family kind of fun stuff. But as far as ghost stories or anything that would be considered, and I feel like almost like there's the language is hard, but anything that would be considered like grounded horror or elevated horror is, there's just not very much of it. There's been a few films in the past, 5 years that I've discovered and that people know about. And also, with KAALI KHUHI, it's not a traditional, horror is like a large umbrella. I mean, there's so many different ways of making horror films. And also the problem that I find is if you are not somebody who is steeped in the work or you're not open-minded, there are certain filmmakers that have fossilized what it is that a horror film is. So at this point, this thing should happen. At this point, these jump scares should happen. We should have this many jump scares. We should have this type of thing and that type of thing. There's like, it's like fossilized, like how people fossilize a canon of what the great auteurs are, cinematic work. And so of course I'm interested in, just dismantling all that stuff and kind of getting in there and messing it all up. But this is like Mo said, this is a ghost story. It's a moody ghost story. It's experiential. I leave a lot of things open-ended. I think traditionally with Indian cinema, especially Hindi cinema, people want things explained to them more. And of course, I'm interested in the opposite. So I think, and which I love, because I trust the audience. They're smart, and it allows them a space to think about things and bring themselves to it. So, yeah.
And I love that you do that, because and horror is the one of the best genres to have that ambiguity in, to have the audience glean whatever they can from that, which makes it either 10 times scarier because our mind just does whatever the hell. But also you can't hand the ending to somebody or hand the answer to everyone in order to round the story out. So I love that you do that. And I mean, I guess like just smash the patriarchy. That's like my big bumper sticker moment. I love all of that. And I think what's so interesting about it, and to Kelly's point about like how, with Nix, it's something that we really try to champion with all of us. My dog's going crazy, I apologize. But I love the fact that just with this, especially with this message, when we're talking about the issue of female infanticide, and you did that through a lot of really nicely nuanced interactions among the villagers, from Sivangi's family. How did you and David Walter like find that balance between being too exposition-y and explaining way too much, or through your subtext, or how did you end up relaying that message as softly as you could with such a strong subject matter?
Well, I think we used a lot of visual metaphors, which, again, like you were saying, I think that horror and genre lends to doing that and exploring with visual language a lot more than, maybe like a straight up drama where, there's a lot of expository dialogue, or you're having a conversation with another person where, that's where you're gleaning the information from. You know, we have the, you know, visual metaphor of the bricks and the fan and the home. Then we have the talisman, the terdagi, which, you know, is a real thing. And then also it's just a powerful symbol of, you know, a group of people who all believe in the same kind of ideology. But all of those things, you know, those are part of the visual landscape of a Punjabi village, but we built it as a fairy tale. So the way that we wrote this script was a little bit different. I usually don't do a treatment, but we were originally working with a producer that wanted a 10-page treatment. And so we just kind of sat down and did that. And then it was actually a really nice process. And it wasn't just like some crazy script that you normally write and you're like, oh God, I got to get myself out of the weeds. You know, it was like, we had this beautiful template. And then, you know, I have a tendency, I think, to be a little more minimalist and kind of poetic. And then Walter is very much more like the plot person. And so in that way, we found a balance to that. And then, you know, of course, like the way that we shot too was, you know, just minimal dialogue. We had this incredible cinematographer who understood everything that I wanted, and we really leaned hard on the metaphors of the film, the well, the terdagi, the language of, you know, even just tonally with you know, the clothes, like everything that we built out, our production designer, art director, you know, every teeny tiny detail was so critical to the story. And I think we leaned super heavy on all of that. And that was all in the script too.
I mean, something that I really appreciate about this story that you all tackled, you know, with as like a sub theme, I suppose, within this very sensitive topic of female infanticide is the idea of complicity. Because I personally feel that that's a discussion that we don't have often enough. You know, when we are talking about you know, relationships between men and women and feminism and patriarchal systems. And, you know, I think that many can make the assumption when they first hear about, you know, female infanticide as a major, you know, issue being tackled in KAALI KHUHI is, oh, well, it's all going to be the men. And something that I thought was really interesting in your film is that there are a lot of women who participate in this practice and are complicit in it in your film. And I thought that was amazing. And I would like to ask, like, how does that kind of feed into the film's broader critique of the patriarchy?
Well, you know, it's actually been interesting because it's a contentious point. And there are people that have critiqued it and asked about it. And I certainly think it's a valid critique. I mean, I know as we were writing and developing and then even working with the actors and filming, this was something that we constantly thought about. I mean, in all honesty, there was one scene that we had to cut, which is part of filmmaking. I don't know if it would have fully addressed it, but what it was a scene at night with, in the village where Darshan goes and there's a group of men. But what I was interested in was not making a story that was black and white about men and women, because I actually believe that gender is a social construct. So as the child, you know, and this is like, we're kind of placing it in this, we're placing it in this space that's timeless. So I'm talking about female infanticide, but even with female feticide, where people are having sonograms and, you know, choosing not to have a child. And of course, you know, I'm pro-choice, I'm not talking about that, but choosing not to have a child because it's a child that's female, and choosing, you know, to not have that child because of that, already you're placing these gender, you know, indicators and markers from that time. And so That's one thing. And then another thing, I really am exploring one family, and in particular, you know, kind of like certain thing I experienced with my family, like many years ago, when I was younger, you know, I was in my early 20s. I met my mother's eldest aunt, great aunt, and she just, you know, she basically said, you know, she asked where my mother's son was, and my mom said, well, I have two daughters, and she said, oh, poor you, yeah, the whole family is cursed. You know, it's because there was like no boys, and it was just normal. It was just normal. And you know, my mom remembers when her youngest sister, my Masi, was born. Um, my grandmother almost died. She had a horrible, you know, labor and birth experience, and and the midwives were there, and all the women were there, and her sisters were there, and my aunt was born. She was the third daughter, and it was like, instead of celebrating, people started wailing, and it was like this, you know, it was just and of course, you know, afterwards, you know, everybody loved my aunt and celebrated her, but when she was born, it was like not the expectation of what they wanted. And in that way, I'm, you know, really being very vulnerable in my experience. And I wanted women front and center because I care about women, and I wanted women's complexity and nuance explored in the film, because I truly think that that is what feminism is. You know, I am exploring complicated characters that are tied up in a system that, yes, they are victims too, but in other ways complicit in that nuanced way. You know, Satyamasi is a woman who lives with deep guilt. She feels like she could have at some point saved her niece, but in other ways she has become empowered. She adopted baby who was an unwanted child. She became this kind of you know, she writes these stories and is a keeper of these tales and stories of the village. So each woman is very different, and she and her sister come from the same family, and they're dealing with the same things, but they're dealing with it in two very different ways. Shivangi's different, her mother's different. And then, you know, with Darshan, I think that it may feel like he is easily absolved, but I don't feel like I absolve him. I feel like he tries to absolve himself. But the way in which he is complicit and guilty is in that way that many people are, where they seem like they're just, you know, kind of on the sidelines. But if you watch every action he does, he never, he benefits from the system. He never actually takes action to do anything. And when it does come time for him to take action, he'll do anything to keep that family secret hidden. He doesn't want it to be revealed. So, you know, I mean, I definitely think it's an interesting place to have a conversation about, and I'm interested in all the different kind of opinions that people have had about it.
So this is your debut feature, and what an incredible debut feature.
Yes.
And, you know, but before KAALI KHUHI, you were really directing shorts. So how did you make that transition from directing shorts to your very first feature? What sort of adjustments, if any, did you have to make along the way?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, it's just trial by error. It's like you're literally like thrown in the fire. I do feel like they're very different forms. I still, you know, want to continue to make short films. I love short films. I think a really good, powerful short film is very hard to make. Like you just have to, you know, and also there's so much place to explore in short filmmaking. And I think that if you're a filmmaker and you're always waiting around to make features, it is such a hard art form, and it costs so much freaking money. Like the money aspect of it is so insane. Um, and that, you know, that's just the reality of it. And so by either screenwriting and then also making shorts, it's a way to continue to work and do you know, you love cinema and you care about it and you want to explore and ask questions and work in it, I think shorts are a beautiful way to work. How did I transition? I mean, I honestly don't know. It was just like this year and a half, 2 years has just been, you know, nothing can prepare you for it. You're on it's like a, you know, crash course. And so, you know, you come out the other side. So now, and it's like, you know, nothing can prepare you for it. Just, you know, so many different ways in which it's done too. And because Netflix greenlit it from the screenwriting stage, it was also very different than what I was used to. You know, I'm used to like, yo, pick up the camera, let's roam this street, get this like B-roll, and we're gonna have our actors improvise. I have a script, but we could throw it out the window. That was not you know, we couldn't do that. It's just so regimented, but amazing and wonderful too.
And landing like a feature at Netflix is pretty huge. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at. That's pretty amazing. Absolutely amazing. Can you take us through what that marketing process was like? Like any challenges, any bumps in the road, anything that you had to kind of step back and punt about while you were going through that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the way that I approached it is, you know, we wrote the script and I just was like, we just need a couple $100,000 and we're going to go and make this thing. We're going to put all our stuff in storage and, you know, our daughter's going to come with us and we're going to go make this film. And along the way, it was like people would come and people would go. I had, you know, one of my friends was a producer and he was going to produce it. He's this awesome guy. He's a, you know, he's an Indian producer, super chill. He's had a ton of films at like Berlin and Cannes and, you know, he knows what he's doing and he's very flexible and he trusted me. But then he got on an Amazon show and he was like, you know, we're friends. And he was like, you know, I don't want you to wait around for me. Why don't you just keep going? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to keep going. Bye. And then at the same time, I had a friend at Netflix here and I just went in for a cup of coffee just to say hi to her. We hadn't seen each other in a while. And she's like, what are you working on? She said, let me read your script. And she read it and she took it to an executive there, which, you know, I didn't know that was really happening. And I tried to not think about it too much, you know, because I think the thing with working in this industry, it's like that real fine balance of like not caring, but caring, you know, because there's so much rejection.
Play it cool, Terrie, play it cool.
Yeah, you gotta play it cool, but then you also gotta like do your intentional stuff where you're like, I'm setting my intentions for this to happen, but then like you throw it all out the window. So, so then that was happening. And I had this great friend who's our consulting producer, and she's the producer here. And she said, you really need an on the ground Indian producer. I'm going to introduce you to somebody. So she introduced me to Anku Pandey, who's our producer. And at the same time, the project went through the Sundance Women's Financing Lab. And so then, you know, I did that. Then Anku came on board. And it was like, we just kept going. We weren't waiting around for anybody. I think that was the thing. It was like, if somebody wanted to get on board, cool. If they didn't, that's fine too. No hard feelings. And then Anku took it to an executive at Netflix in India. And they had just opened up their India office. So this was like one of their first kind of babies that they greenlit from the script stage. And we did a little test for them. I went to India. And I met our lead, who, you know, we did like a 5-minute test, and then we got greenlit, and then we went back to India, and they gave us so much creative freedom because, you know, they're putting out so much stuff, and it's all very different. So they gave us a ton of creative freedom, and we had awesome producers and a great team, and they let us cast who we wanted, and our cast is like, you know, we have Shabana Azmi, who's like this, you know, 40 years veteran kind of grand dame of Indian cinema. And then we have, you know, local theater actors who are also incredible and wonderful. So just, you know, just to, I mean, they really gave me a lot of creative freedom, because I don't think that most studios are going to let somebody make this kind of surreal, feminist, experimental ghost story, which is exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, this was clearly an international effort. And I think you touched upon this a bit, like the joys and struggles of working fluidly between the US and India. Like, can you maybe share a little bit more about the international marketplace and how that really works, and what sort of roles are coming into play, whether you know, that involves gender or race or culture, and how you have like adapted to kind of work between the two?
Well, I mean, I'm still figuring that out. You know, I'm still figuring that out, because it's like Netflix is a US based company and they're a global company, but this is a Netflix original out of India. So when it was released, the marketing came through them. You know, the film releases through them, but then it's global because my friends all over the world are watching it all at the same time. And people are, you know, I have friends who are watching it in, you know, Japan and Korea and Panama and stuff. So that's been really, yeah, really, really interesting. I mean, I still think that we're figuring it out. You know, when I have conversations with executives and people developing work and they're interested in that global market. Like they know that there's a space for that, but I don't think that people have quite figured it out. I think that in international film, you know, with like, say like the Oscars or films that go to like a big festival, like, you know, so we didn't go to a festival because of COVID, and also because it was going to go directly on a platform. I'm used to the festival world. So, you know, initially it would be like the film would premiere at a festival and you do the festival route. But instead it was like millions of people got to watch it all at one go, which was crazy. And so I don't know, you know, I think that we're still figuring that out. Like I have a couple of projects that would be considered international, but then, you know, they're in local language, and I like specificity. So I'm not making work that's like going to be universal. I like real culturally specific things, but then there's something about it that resonates internationally.
Right.
So I don't know. I really don't think I think again, it's like one of those moving target kind of things. Cause you know, like a company like Netflix or Amazon, there's so much like tech companies too. So they're constantly recalibrating and changing, unlike, you know, kind of older school studios.
And like how do you see these two regions, or even like these two communities, these two film communities? And you know, you just mentioned oh my God, specificity. So we can get specific if we're maybe talking about, you know, women filmmakers in India and the US, or women horror filmmakers in India and the US. How do you see you know, these two communities potentially working together, learning from each other to elevate women's contributions within the broader genre space?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I was actually thinking about that before we started our conversation, because there was a review that came out about the film, I think today, which was really nice. It was a great review. But the person said, you know, I don't know if American horror audiences are going to watch this film. They're going to sit through the subtitles, which I want to believe that's not true. And that made me kind of sad, because I watch a ton of Korean films, Japanese films. I just watched this amazing German horror film the other day, which is just stunning and amazing. And I would hope, I mean, I think Bong Joon-ho said something when he got his Oscars this last year, which feels like 20 years ago, but he said something about subtitles. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. I mean, everybody's watching films with subtitles. So, you know, I do hope, I hope that's not real. I hope that, you know, people are watching films with subtitles. I do think that there's a great space for working collectively and collaboratively. I mean, I'm certainly always searching for filmmakers that are working in genre in other places, and they're there, but you have to search for them, you know. And I don't like the idea of these divisions, you know. I don't like, you know, I've heard people say, well, American audiences might not, you know, watch a horror film made in India and then like have to explain that, no, it doesn't have song and dance. I think we're more smart and evolved as audience members, you know, than that, and as creators in that.
No, that's excellent. I'm really excited. I'm just very happy for you. This is has to be such a cool experience. I mean, granted, we are in the middle of a global pandemic, but it has to be, I mean, it's coming off the festival circuit, and being maybe amongst hundreds of people watching your film in that moment, not to deter from that, but have millions of people at this one time globally be enjoying your film. How was that different from, how did it feel this year as opposed to regular film festivals?
Well, you know, I mean, it's like it's multifold. Like it's super exciting. I'm so grateful. It's crazy because not everybody has loved the film. There's been, you know, a lot of critique about the film because, you know, because it was a global release, there were certainly like film critics that are used to traditional things that are like, I don't understand this experiential horror film, or they have these fossilized ideas of what a big horror film is supposed to be. I've also heard, in particular, some Indian critics say, you should not, you know, the problem of blending like a social issue with horror, which to me, it's like, okay, well then you just don't understand what genre is, because since, you know, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, like people have been, and before, this is like so much the core of what genre is. I mean, you want to talk about, you know, zombies, Godzilla. I mean, there's just so many things that are deeply rooted in exploring, you know, class and capitalism and racism, and anyways, just so much stuff like that. So then if somebody says that, I'm like, okay, well then you don't really, it's hard to understand what you're saying, because you're not really speaking about the genre, the body of work, you know, of genre. But in other ways, it's exciting, you know. It was like all of a sudden meeting millions of people at the same time with opinions about your film, whereas like a film festival or like a smaller, it's like you're kind of protected, you know. So in this way, it was like, oh wow, oh my gosh, I'm, you know, and with social media, it's like I get messages all the time, which are pretty amazing, you know, to wake up to like some young woman, you know, just saying like, this meant so much to me. I've never seen anything like this. I also had people reach out to me to tell me that this was their family's experience. There's this one woman who wrote to me, and she just told me the most beautiful story, and it was very bittersweet too. Yeah, I guess it wasn't so beautiful. It was more bittersweet, but she said that when she was a little girl, her grandmother, who was blind at the time, used to kind of wander at night and wake up with nightmares. And when her grandmother passed away, when she got older, she asked her mom, like, what had happened. And her mom said that her grandmother felt like she had been haunted by the ghosts of young girls that she had, you know, basically participate in, you know, in a very similar situation when she was younger. And so I've, you know, to have people vulnerably open and share that has been powerful and emotional, and hopefully it's created dialogue and conversation, and you know, I've I've now you know, connected with actually a lot of young Punjabi women who are, you know, just really moved by the film and the fact that there's this kind of work that's happening and they're interested in doing it. And so, you know, I have a new mentee who is this young Punjabi filmmaker, and she's amazing. So, you know, there's been all sorts of things that are happening larger than just the film.
That's incredible.
That is so amazing.
I love it.
Oh my gosh.
I think
Thank
we're
you
gonna.
so much. Yeah, go ahead, Kylie, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I think we're gonna move over to the audience portion of the Q&A.
Oh, yeah.
But this has been really amazing, Terrie. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. Mo, did you want to
Yeah,
pick somebody?
sure. We have a lot of great questions here. I want to start with Sam. Sam, go ahead and open up your cam and your mic to ask Terrie your question.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, first, congrats on a movie. I loved it a lot. But the question is, I'm just gonna read it. I thought that the ending had a very hopeful feel to it, that the future generation will be different. Can you speak to that? Do you foresee not just progress, but communities eventually being able to reckon with the scars of their past made bare?
Yeah, so the ending, I wanted it to be hopeful. I think that some people read it as Shivangi has died, and that's fine. You know, it was kind of supposed to have this full circle rebirth feeling. But yeah, the ending is hopeful, and it's basically, you know, Shivangi has taken the torch, and you know, right before the house falls, when she looks into the mirror, she sees the ghost, but then she sees herself. And so, you know, at really what it's about is she's claiming her own self-will and gaining agency to claim her own existence and her own space and her own life. And so, yeah, the ending is it's supposed to be hopeful, and then you see all the little girls. Actually, my daughter is in there. She made her little debut at the end. That was such a fun scene to shoot, and I loved all the I loved all the little girls, and you know, they're all wearing a different color than the color that's in the film. And then we have Twinkle the buffalo walk through, and you know, there's a lot of layers and metaphors, but really the ending is hopeful, and I wanted to leave the audience with that.
I'm just making a personal comment here. I loved that image of Twinkle the buffalo. You know, so he's the family pet, basically. You know, who's been there, you know, for a couple generations, and you know, is largely connected to Satya, it seems, Shivangi's aunt, and then Shivangi is the one who's taking the reins, quite literally, at the end there, and kind of leading, you know, Twinkle and hence her family into a new world. I loved that. I thought that was so beautiful.
Yeah, and then, you know, it's funny, the buffalo, she wasn't supposed to walk, but she does, and we're like, just let her go. Like, I thought it was
Who's
like
gonna stop a buffalo?
yeah, I know. There's like a bit of like humor there. And then, you know, it's interesting. People have pointed out, and we knew this was happening too. In Hindu mythology, the god of death actually rides a buffalo. So there have been people that have interpreted it like that. And in a way, we kind of subverted that and flipped that to, you know, basically kind of change that narrative.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks. Jarrell, if you want to go ahead and open up your cam or your mic, and you can ask Terrie your question.
Just a sec.
There he is.
Hi, Terrie. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Bo. Thanks for putting this on, and thank you for doing this, Terrie. My question is, as a writer, what character did you inject yourself or any of your experiences into the movie and into any of the characters?
I mean, I think certainly Shivangi, looking back, was definitely a vehicle for me to express myself. I think she's, you know, certainly the one that's that would be the closest to that. But she's kind of a combination of, I would say, you know, my mom, and just kind of also, you know, I really wanted Riva Aurora, who's the actress. You know, she had long straight hair, and she cut her hair for me, which was a really big deal because she's a working actor. I really wanted her to have that haircut that I love. That's like, you know, my favorite from all my favorite Korean films and Tale of Two Sisters and stuff. So she's kind of this like combination of so many things that I love. But I think that, you know, and then I think there's little bits and pieces here and there, but certainly her, I connect to just personally more than any other character.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jarrell.
Thanks.
Thanks. I have Paul. If you want to go ahead and open up your cam and your mic, Paul, and ask your question.
Hey, Kelly and Mel, thanks for putting this on. Terry, I watched your film today. It was very, very good. I had a question, actually it's kind of two. What works really influenced you as a child, or moving, you know, as you're doing films, and if you had no budget at all, what literary work would you want to adapt?
Oh my gosh. You know, so many things have influenced me. I mean, I you know, certainly grew up with all the kind of classic 80s films, but in the past, you know, 10 years, I think, you know, for this film in particular, I really took a lot of inspiration from The Wailing, Tale of Two Sisters, all the kind of this just, you know, I've always been interested in international films. So, you know, I really loved kind of the early mid 90s. I was really into Chinese, Taiwanese cinema, and Koreans, not Korean, actually Japanese cinema. And then in the past, like 10 years, 5 years, it's just been a lot of Korean stuff. So for this film, you know, I think I took a lot of inspiration from The Wailing, Tale of Two Sisters. I also love Jennifer Kent's work. And I'm trying to think who else. I mean, you know, so many amazing women filmmakers. I'm constantly kind of gleaning and looking for new people, and then back to the, you know, kind of masters. If there was anything to adapt, my God, I mean, I would, you know, I actually have a friend who's adapting an Ursula Le Guin book, which I just cannot believe is happening. I'm just like so envious. I love her work. I would love to adapt like a Image comic. You know, I love really good graphic novels. I mean, I've heard that Saga's getting adapted. My God, I would love to work on that.
I know. Grab a ticket, get that.
I mean, right now, like Paper Girls is in the, you know, writer's room, which is just insane to me. Love to be in that, you know, just fly on the wall. I also love Monstrous. I'd love to adapt that. You know, just I really love really good graphic novels, because I think there's just so much space to explore, and they're just, you know, doing things like, I mean, which Ursula Le Guin did, or Octavia Butler, where they're just working with characters, where they're like, you know, not, they're like just messing with like gender and society, and, you know, tearing apart things and dismantling things. So something in there I'd love to adapt.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Paul.
much.
Thank you.
Awesome. And our last question comes from another Nix member. Melody, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi there. First of all, I wanted to thank you so much for sharing your experience with Nix on making your film. And I loved what you said about subtitles, I just have to say, because Tale of Two Sisters, The Wailing, those are favorite films of mine. I'm also jealous about Ursula Le Guin, because Left Hand of Darkness is one of my favorite books. And of course, Octavia Butler, it's been a long time coming for that, anything of hers to be adapted. But I actually have a long kind of fandom with Indian horror from Roz, which is the first Indian horror film I ever saw. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but I was totally floored. It's like, what, this exists? And then up until recently, Ghost Stories. And I was really curious, as both a woman and as a genre director, what did you find was the most challenging aspect of working on set, and how did you deal with that? And then a second question is, what's your next project?
I mean, I think the hardest thing about working on set is, you're the captain of the ship, but, I am hardly 5'2". I have a tendency to maybe appear younger, and, I love to laugh. I'm a very humorous person. And so I think that being on set, and, we worked with a lot of women. I mean, my producer's a woman, my executive's a woman, art department, my AD, but, other people on set, they're used to, especially in Indian and Hindi cinema, they're used to men who are powerful and tough, and they smoke cigarettes, and they're sit in these chairs, and they're the director, and they yell. And I was like, dudes, I am not yelling. I'm not doing that. And we're working with children. We're working with mostly women on set, and I'm creating a really safe space. So I think those, and I have a phenomenal crew and team, but I think that just with those layers, we all had to figure out a way in which we were going to communicate. And, I myself had to go, okay, how am I going to get what I need without yelling and screaming or being super demanding? Or actually, no, I can be demanding, but I don't need to be like what is considered a man.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think the expectation is always well, if you want to level up, then you better become this thing. And it's no, we're not doing that. I don't want to be that thing. I'm not interested in that, and I'm not going to be that. So, but that was a lot of my own stuff in my head that I had to shift. And, I think also just because I'm a smaller person, so those, I think those things, I think also just, I mean, we were working, like I said, in this super rural village, in the high summer, which is 120-degree days, but we had to make it look like it was cold and winter and rainy. And we shot for 32 days. Almost half of those were night shoots. We're working with kids. We're working with blood and rain and animals, and it's really intense. So it was fast moving and really intense, and we had to get a lot done in a very short amount of time. And in that way, I was just so lucky because I just had this, I mean, I was literally, my producers were just we are gonna, you're a first-time feature director, we're gonna make sure that you have the best of the best to support you. So that was being on set. And then what's happening next, we're in this pandemic. So it's I'm, I want so much to be on set and to be making my next thing, but I don't know what's happening next. I've got a couple of features and 2 pilots that are out. And what I'm doing right now is, I write with my husband and my co-writer. And so we're developing a feature right now that we're writing, because in that way, you know, I mean, and, you know, my daughter's home, she's in 5th grade. So it's like, everything's just like kind of crazy, but it is what it is. We're all in it together. But the one thing I know I can do is write. And so every day we try to get pages in, and we're developing and writing. And in that way, like, we can, you know, feel liberated as creators and writers. And I don't know what's going to happen next. I know that I have some friends that shot like super low budget features. And then, you know, there's like commercials and TV happening, but I think that with like COVID regulations and stuff, it's just like production is probably out of the question for a while.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing your next project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Melody. Thanks so much. Well, that is pretty much, that's it. That's all we got today. I'm so pleased, Terrie. I'm so thankful that you were able to do this with us, and I just wish you the best of everything. This has been so exciting to watch your film and have you really just dig into the inspirations for that, and just now seeing it with new eyes. I just want to go. I want to watch it again as soon as I have a moment, just to really realize what you were speaking to. I'm just really pleased with how today went. Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm just putting my gratitude out there as well. That this was phenomenal. This was such a great conversation. Just so many layers and nuance to your film and to your process and your experience and your journey as a storyteller. It's just been really great. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. That was really fun. It was great and I feel very lucky to be in community with you and just all of us, you know, excited to see what everybody is up to and next for the podcast and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Feeling is very much mutual.
Yeah.
I also just want to thank everybody who participated today, who joined in, who asked questions. That was just so wonderful of everybody. I know that many people here are, you know, also writers and filmmakers. And so Terrie, just one final question, I guess. Is there anything that maybe you just want to pass on before we bid farewell?
Things to pass on. Oh my gosh, I don't know. You know, I mean, first of all, we have this great community on Twitter, so please connect on there. I love, you know, I mean, I am an audience member, I'm a reader, so I love connecting with other writers and filmmakers, and I'm always looking for things. I think having community and support is so important. And I know that right now we're in this pandemic and it's really frustrating, but I think if, you know, there's ways to, again, you know, that word I love where you liberate yourself as an artist. If you are moved and need to do that work, you know, wake up and do your pages and you know, share them, like, you know, with amongst ourselves, and just know that you're not alone in it, because it can feel really, really stifling and frustrating, and feeling like you're not moving, you know, like there's always, like I said, you know, it's like you're always like the next goalpost, but it's more like you're in this, like, you're going around this circle up this mountain, and the journey is not like from, you know, these goals from like a short to a feature to this. You're always just finding ways to create. And yeah, I guess that's, you know, I'm saying that out loud. I'm saying it to myself. Really.
I did drop Terrie's Twitter handle into the chat for all of our audience members, but yeah.
Yes, do follow. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. If you're not following Nyx already, get on it. At Nyx Horror on tweets, also at Nyx Horror on Instagram as well, if you do the Insta. As you see, Twitter now has fleets, so it's like being on Instagram anyway. So I appreciate all of you being here today, and Terrie as well. Thank you so much, and the best is yet to come of everything. So thank you again. Good night, everyone.
Sorry, and just very quickly, this will be going on our as well, everybody. So stay tuned. Anyway.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Good night.